evening and welcome to Composite. Tonight we're at the Bartlett Plantation, southeast of Montgomery, Alabama, where you'll see one of the most unusual exhibitions of dogs handling sheep and cattle. We'll be talking with Foy Evans of Hiwassee, Arkansas, about how these dogs do their thing. A little later in the program, we'll be talking with a gentleman who covered the testing of the atomic bombs in the Pacific 31 years ago. And finally, we'll be traveling north of Montgomery to Camp Aska for a look at a special camp for some very special handicapped children. As we said, we're at the Bartlett Plantation, southeast of Montgomery, Alabama, and we're talking with Foy Evans, who has got to be probably one of the top authorities on border collies. And Foy, I understand that this has been a hobby of yours, but it's more of a profession now.
It started as a hobby and it's grown. My wife bought me my first one some years ago, about 25, and I got the fever, and now I own a number of border collies. And
let's talk about the breed itself. The border collie dog, where did it come from, and what does a border collie dog do?
The name is derived from the border country between Scotland and England, in sheep country where the shepherd depends on the dog to help him make a living. And over there they call it the working collie. He's known as a border collie here. The dog was developed by selective breeding over many, many generations, and those Scotsmen have come up with a dog that has a lot of natural stock sense. And that's what we have to work with. I have said that it's around 90% dog and about 10% man, because he teaches the dog to maneuverability and obedience. The dog is born with most of his stock sense.
Now, you talked about stock sense, you talked about the dogs working. You've said earlier that a good working dog like this can take the place of several men on a farm as far as sheep or herding livestock.
Well, that is true. I have heard some cattlemen say that he'd rather have a pair of good border collie dogs as 3 or 4 people on good quarter horses. Don't want to offend the quarter horse people, but that dog is very effective. In a short time, he trains his cattle to move efficiently and where he wants them to. They respond to a dog quite well.
Now, what brings you to Alabama?
Well, I have an old friend, Bill Dillard, here, and Bill is also a border collie breeder, and we just like to get together for a visit now and then. We'll be doing some other work and entertaining some youth from other parts of the world, and mostly down here visiting Bill Dillard.
Okay, now let's talk about the Alabama Stock Dog Association. I believe that's the correct title. Are you going to be helping these people to get organized, and what will you be doing in conjunction with this group?
I have been talking with Bill about this now for a short time. He visited our Arkansas Association and the trial at my place June 4th. And I think that gave Bill a little bit a worse case of the fever. So Bill is the prime mover behind a trial that will be held here September 16th and 17th. And I'll be helping Bill set one up because this will be their initial trial, and arranging for livestock, judges, and course, and that sort of thing, in helping him get his first show off the ground.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the dog itself. Is this completely an instinctive thing that these dogs do as far as working the cattle and working the sheep?
Yes, it really is. I had an 8-week-old puppy. Of course, it isn't 8 weeks old anymore, but at 8 weeks, that puppy was trying to herd the cats in the yards. And the, chickens or anything else that moves, those babies usually begin very early wanting to herd those animals instead of chase them. So that is a characteristic of the border collie. It comes on very young as a rule.
Now, the competition, when you go to a trial, explain to me how you work the trial. Is it a situation where you work against the clock, or is it judged on the individual merits of the dog?
It's a competitive thing, Anna. There is a system of points worked out. There are different phases of work. And they generally get the roughest stock they can find to separate the men from the boys, and they're allowed 12 minutes. The dog goes out over a distance, brings the sheep or cattle into the handler, and then he demonstrates driving away, and the fact that the dog knows his right from his left better than most people, including me. And then he brings them in and pins them, which what it amounts to is all of the practical aspects of handling livestock on the farm.
Do these border collies make good house dogs or apartment dogs as such, or are you actually doing the dog a disservice when he has this instinctive herding ability by putting him inside or in a confined area?
The dog is a working dog. He has a lot of drive and all this natural ability, and even though some of them make wonderful pets, I'm a little reluctant to see one of my dogs go to the pet dog type situation. I'd rather they go to a farm and help the man.
Mm-hmm. How widespread is the popularity of the border collie?
Well, he is all over the world now, but relatively new here in the United States as a working dog. There are many people who have only seen a border collie on TV or in the movies or in a rodeo exhibition, which leaves them with the idea that he's a trick dog. And I think maybe that has been detrimental. What I'm interested in is helping the man on the farm take this dog with all this ability and use it as a labor-saving device. That's where the dog really shines, on the farm, helping the man.
Okay, let's watch him work.
Okay, very good.
How are these dogs judged now? As far as I realize, there's a time factor involved and a point factor as far as the way they handle. What other factors are considered as you watch a dog work cattle or sheep?
The quality of the dog's work is the only thing that is counted. These dogs are not bred for conformation or for color. They're bred entirely on working ability. And this working ability is transmitted from parent to parent. The dogs are culled heavily so that only the very best working stock is left. But you are watching, and the dog is judged solely on the basis of his response to the trainer's or the handler's commands. The dog is not supposed to be thinking for himself, which he will do occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're training a dog like this, or when Foy's training a dog, do you work just one-on-one with a dog, or do you work a young dog with an old dog occasionally?
You never work a young dog with an old one. Occasionally you will work dogs in pairs as a team, but they will be assigned to different jobs, and you never put a young dog with an old dog expecting the young dog to learn from the old dog. It doesn't work that way. Each dog has to be trained separately, and as a rule they work individually. But there are occasions where they work in teams, but two experienced dogs assigned to different jobs.
So you've gotten a chance to meet Mr. and Mrs. Foy Evans of Hiwassee, Arkansas, find out how the border collie works sheep and cattle. In a moment, we'll be talking with a man who was in the Pacific when the United States was testing the atomic bomb 31 years ago. That coming up in a moment. "31 years ago, the United States detonated 2 atomic bombs on the tiny island of Bikini in the Marshall Island chain in the South Pacific. The gentleman that's with us tonight, Star Smith of Montgomery, Alabama, was one of the reporters that was covering that particular bomb test, and we're going to be talking to a man who has now become known as a journalist and a public relations consultant for many, many concerns in the city of Montgomery and across the state of Alabama and the southeast United States. Star, exactly what was your purpose in being on Bikini or near Bikini during the testing of the atomic bombs back in 1946?
I was one of about 150 reporters, international reporters, Bob, who had been invited to go out to cover the Bikini atom bomb test, the Able and the Baker test. Bear in mind that this is only the second year of the so-called atomic age, and the Able and the Baker test, or bombs, were the fourth and fifth bombs detonated in history. You'll recall that the very first bomb was detonated in the desert of New Mexico, near Alamogordo, New Mexico, the previous year. That was the very first bomb. The second one, of course, is the most famous of all, the Hiroshima bomb. And the third was the Nagasaki bomb. So here it is now in July of 1946, and it's about 11 months since the previous August when the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki bombs were dropped. And the world just knows relatively little about atomic energy. They know little about the ultimate weapon. So the United States government, at the direction of the president, ran these tests. And they were exhaustive tests, 42,000 people involved, something like 200 ships involved, 150 airplanes, and as I mentioned, 150 reporters. We had our own ship, a communication ship of the Navy called the Appalachian, had broadcast studios, press rooms, shortwave gear, everything on the ship.
As a young journalist going out to cover what has later been looked on as a very historic event, what were you expecting when you were on that ship, waiting, counting off the seconds before that bomb fell from that B-29?
Well, tense, curious, not really knowing exactly what to expect.
Could you describe what you saw when the atomic bomb actually was exploded?
There were literally scores of Navy vessels, old, worn-out battleships, destroyers, vessels of all kinds in the lagoon. Now, this was the so-called target fleet, or the ghost fleet. Now, on the decks of these various ships were tanks, airplanes, automobiles, artillery, just virtually everything that you would normally find, say, on a battlefield or on a battlefield. Now, in addition to that, there were literally hundreds of live animals, goats, guinea pigs, just normal pigs, rats, this sort of thing, and they were positioned on these ships in positions or stations where personnel or men normally would be, because understand now, this is a scientific test. So we had examined all of this the day before, and we pulled out 10 or 12 miles and pulled the ship broadside, and it seems to me that it was around mid-morning, I don't recall exactly, say 10:30, 11 o'clock, and everybody was out on deck, and they had issued very heavy eye shades or goggles. And from my vantage point, we could see just really this huge ball of fire just leap out of the ocean. Now, understand we were 10 miles away. And very quickly, almost in a matter of seconds, then the mushroom cloud appeared. And of course, that's become the trademark of the atom bomb. And it just seemed to climb thousands and thousands of feet into the air in virtually no time at all. Now, a colleague of mine, Jack Carlisle of the Detroit News, wrote, I think, the best description of the bomb. And this is what he said. The cloud was a pheasant brown with white patches at first. Then it began an amazing transformation in color and shapes before our eyes. It seemed to steam and boil and churn at the bottom. There it turned laundry white. It was pinkish in the middle, salmon colored at the top. In less than 2 minutes, it climbed thousands of feet high. The mushroom broke out suddenly at the top, and the cloud changed colors.
Did you or did any of your colleagues on board the ship, as you viewed this atomic bomb, have any idea as to what you were seeing, as to the birth of this atomic age? Did you have any idea of what would lie ahead?
Yes, in answer to your question, I think we knew that from here on out. Now, bear in mind also, Bob, that many of these reporters were former war correspondents. Many of us had been in Europe with the war, and I think all of us realized that conventional warfare was a thing of the past. I mean, when it really come to an all-out war, that we wouldn't be doing it in the trenches and we wouldn't be dropping conventional bombs in the sense that we have been doing the same thing, for a long, long time, that this was something brand new.
Star, thank you for taking time to talk with us about this particular test. I know that it was an historic moment for you, and I'm sure that everyone has enjoyed seeing the pictures and hearing your accounts of this moment in time 31 years ago at the birth of the atomic era.
Enjoyed being here.
Coming up in a moment, we'll be moving north of Montgomery to Camp Aska. Our composite camera now moves to Lake Martin. We're halfway between Dadeville and Alexander City, and we're at Camp Aska. Camp Aska is operated by the Alabama Society for Crippled Children and Adults. It's a beautiful facility on the shores of Lake Martin where over 323 youngsters came last year to take part in the camp's activities. We're talking with Bert Emmons, and Bert is the camp administrator. And Bert, tell us how the camp got started and what is the purpose of Camp Aska?
Well, in Alabama, there's been a crying need for several years for a facility where handicapped children and adults could enjoy recreational opportunities that you and I normally take for granted. There are several facilities like this around the country, although none really compare to what exists here. But it's an attempt to provide a summer camp experience for children and adults who are normally bound to their homes because of some physical or mental disability.
Who is eligible to attend camp here?
Well, as far as our summer camp is concerned, basically what it boils down to is any child or adult who cannot go to a so-called normal summer camp because of a physical or mental disability is eligible to attend Camp Aska. And that leaves us open, of course, to all kinds of disabilities, and we recruit and schedule campers on an individual basis based on their needs and whether or not they will fit into our program and what we have to offer at camp.
Where do these campers come from?
They're from all over the state of Alabama, and as a matter of fact, this session we have one child from Florida. We take campers on from Alabama first because we're built by the people of the state of Alabama. We have a mandate to serve those people, but until such time as we're absolutely full, we'll accept campers from out of state. But they come from all over the state of Alabama.
How is Camp Aska financed?
Well, it's owned and operated, as you said, Bob, by the Alabama Society for Crippled Children and Adults, which is the statewide organization that stands behind this facility. Basically speaking, the facility was built by out-of-pocket funds by the citizens of the state of Alabama, which is one reason we're proud to be able to be on Composite and let people know just exactly what's going on.
What kind of facilities does Camp Aska have to offer the handicapped child or adult?
First of all, we're on, like you said, a beautiful 230-acre site on the lake. There are 8 buildings, all of which are completely winterized. They can be used summer and winter. They're completely air-conditioned and heated. We have a heated swimming pool especially adapted for use by handicapped persons. We have a boat and a dock and housing for 112 people and a dining hall that seats 150.
Now let's talk about some of the activities that go on here at Camp Aska. First of all, the canoeing. How does a youngster become acclimated to canoeing when perhaps he has spent the majority of his life in a wheelchair or perhaps in braces or a walker?
Well, one of the myths we try to dispel is the fact that because a person is handicapped, he can't take part in a lot of these activities, and that's simply not true, as you can see from what's going on. It's a perfectly normal opportunity for a child, a perfectly normal thing for a child who is in a wheelchair or wears crutches and uses braces to get into a canoe and paddle around just like any other child. He may need some help getting into and out of the canoe, which is what our camp staff is for. And he may need some adaptation as far as holding the paddle or actually maneuvering the canoe around in the water. But we have found that just because a child has some unique disability, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have abilities. And that's what we try to stress at camp, is the fact that there are lots and lots and lots of things that children can do in spite of any handicap they may have. And they do just exactly the same kind of activities at Camp Aska that they might do at any other so-called normal summer camp, and canoeing is one of them.
The swimming pool area is unique in the fact that it has been adapted for the handicapped.
Right. It has a ramp that goes down into the pool so that people in wheelchairs rather than having to be lifted in and out of the chair to get into the pool, we can just take the camper in his wheelchair or in our camp wheelchair if he chooses not to let his get wet, just right down into the pool on this ramp. And in many cases, we'll put an inner tube on a camper prior to his going in the water and then just wheel them down into the water, give them a little shove, and they're off in the water without the wear and tear on them and without the wear and the tear on the staff. It's a nice thing to have.
At the firing range, the youngsters get a very thorough working out, so to speak, before they're even allowed to touch one of the air rifles that you use here.
Well, we think that the very best thing that we can do for the campers is to give them experiences that they don't normally have. And of course, inherent in anything that goes on in camp is the safety factor. And anytime you're in canoes, anytime you're in the swimming pool, anytime you're at the rifle range, there are certain rules. There are certain regulations. You have to know about the equipment you're using. And at the rifle range, like you say, they learn the parts of the gun. They learn the rules of the range. They learn the signals so that they know when it's safe to fire and so forth. And that's all part of learning to use the equipment that they're using. And it's just something that they appreciate the time taken so that they know they're safe and they're learning what they need to learn.
Another popular activity I know is going up to the old fishing hole.
That's right. That's quite an experience. In fact, we found that, I would venture to say that maybe the pool is the most popular place, but fishing has to be a real close second because it's a real thrill for kids to go up there and sink a worm and come out with a little bass or brim or whatever the case may be. And not only the kids, but on a year-round basis in some of our services for adults, particularly with the adults, the fishing pond surpasses the pool in popularity. In addition to that, we have arts and crafts. We have a photography program where the campers take the pictures and develop them themselves. We have a group of campers who put out a camp newspaper. And of course, music is an inherent part of the program. A lot of singing goes on, and skits and typical evening programs, treasure hunt one night, a dance one night, and really, I think you'll see that they're very typical kinds of camp activities that would go on in just about any summer camp.
If someone is watching tonight that has perhaps never been introduced to Camp ASCA and would like to participate or would like to perhaps make a financial contribution toward the betterment of these children, how could a person go about doing this?
Well, we'd love for them to contact us at Camp ASCA, Jackson's Gap, Alabama. Or in Montgomery, the Alabama Society for Crippled Children and Adults has its office at the Rehabilitation Center on the Southern Bypass that most Montgomeryans, I think, are probably familiar with.
Bert, thanks for talking with us today, and congratulations on an outstanding job here at Camp ASCA.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate your coming.
And that's Composite for this week. We hope that you'll be back with Ivy Berman next week for another look at what's happening across the state of Alabama on Composite. Until then, thank you for watching.
There's talk around Montgomery, Alabama, that George and Cornelia Wallace may be close to getting a divorce. A Montgomery television station, WSFA TV, reported yesterday that a divorce petition had been drawn up for Governor Wallace. Mrs. Wallace couldn't be reached. Wallace's deputy press secretary quoted the governor as saying there's nothing to that, and that's where that story stands this evening.
This is 12 country, it's your country, and 12 country is you. Making things look better far and wide, from a new tall tower that stands sky high. Over 12 country, it's your country, 'cause 12 country is you.
The next morning, we passed through the poppy fields of western Turkey. Overnight, 4 freight cars had been attached to the Orient Express, slowing our progress. 59 hours after leaving Paris, we reached Istanbul. This same trip by air would have taken less than 3 hours. Passengers would have received a hot meal, and the fare would have been cheaper than a sleeping car on the train. That is why the Orient Express has been allowed to die. The passing of the Orient Express will no doubt be mourned by the mystery writers, but few passengers who have taken this train are apt to share that view. Not after 2,000 miles without a hot meal and a shower. John Palmer, NBC News, Istanbul.
Thank you, and good night for all of us at NBC News.
Those horrible ticks are really ticking. Before they wind up on your dog, in your home, near your family, get the Hearts 2-in-1 collar, the famous white collar that kills both ticks and fleas. Don't let the pet you love live with dangerous ticks or fleas, outdoors or in your home. To kill ticks and fleas, the right collar is the white collar, the 2-in-1 collar from Hearts.
That was some party, dancing all night, ended up eating pizza by dawn till light. I can't help it if I like to live, but living like that means something's got to give. I got to get me out of seltzer, fast, fast, pop, pop, fizz, 'cause oh, what a relief it is, fast, fast.
Upset stomach and aching head? Meet the Plop Plop Fizz Fizz.
Oh, what a relief it is, fast, fast, fast.
I might kill somebody with a blink of an eye.
Through his eyes flows the power, the man with the power, and a dangerous mission. Guard an oil-rich princess from kidnappers, an all-new movie thriller. Then, Susie Knickerbocker with Frank Sinatra and Muhammad Ali. The movie at 8, 7 Central and Mountain. Then Susie Visits, tonight on NBC.
That's...
Frank, I can make a jury dance on the end of a string, but I gotta have a string.
I'll get you evidence. Believe me, I'll give you a string.
The Playboy and the ex-cop, like no lawyers you've ever seen. Tony Roberts is Rossetti, and Squire Friedel is Ryan. Rossetti and Ryan, a world premiere. Monday at 9, 8 Central and Mountain on NBC.
Now, the hit movie returns, The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams. Forced to flee civilization, Adams moves deeper and deeper into the wilderness. The story of a man at peace with nature and all her creatures. The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams, a special encore presentation. Wednesday at 8, 7 Central and Mountain. Right before Dean Martin roasts Jackie Gleason on NBC.